Hello, welcome, and sorry. Welcome back to another live stream from Maple Bitcoin. I'm Jor. I'm joined by Forrest and Rajat, and we're here to talk about Bitcoin. We're talking about the sneaky way to obtain Bitcoin today, among a lot of topics. This one's going to be a little bit less about current events and more about, I don't know, different topics. You guys are going to enjoy it. So, how we doing, boys? You guys good?
Yeah, we're good. Just a quick reminder to everyone in the chat, give the video a thumbs up. We want this to reach as many people as possible. That helps a lot. And the other thing too, we will be answering some questions later on in this live stream. And if you do have any questions, it helps us a lot if you actually ask them in all caps. Then we're a little more likely to see them. So appreciate that. Yeah, doing well. Excited to talk about this. It has to do a little bit with tax season. And a little bit about maybe some strategies you could implement to acquire more Bitcoin and less fiat, which is always good.
And
Sounds great.
we refrain from putting anything tax related in the title because we knew that you guys and girls wouldn't show up today. So hello everybody in the chat. Welcome. Pour yourself a drink. I was just pouring myself a beer here. Where should we begin, boys? Let's start on that topic. I think this one's worth diving into a little bit. Forrest actually had a really good tweet the other day that kind of inspired this first part of the chat here. And basically the idea behind it was that most people get pretty excited when they get a tax refund at the end of the year, or I guess in the springtime. And basically what that means is throughout the year, you gave an interest-free loan to the government, to the gov. So instead of doing that, we just kind of wanted to bring that to light a little bit so people are a little bit more aware of that's what it is. So I guess let's just dive into it. What's your guys' experience with tax season, with paying taxes, with tax refunds, and how does that lead to more Bitcoin, or how could it lead to more Bitcoin for people?
So we have to consider a couple of things before we go into that. You have to consider that they could fine you if you don't file on time. So that's one thing that takes a stack out of your Bitcoin, first of all. And the next thing is that if you want to delay your payments, you do have to pay interest. So that's something to consider as well. But I've tried it before. Their interest rates are about 9%. So
Okay.
I think it's worth it.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously none of this is all a recommendation to anybody. So I'm just talking out of my own experience. I always pay my taxes on time, but I don't pay them early. So back when I was an employee, it was just kind of set up. I mean, I could ask my employer to change the tax rate, but it's deducted off your paycheck, off your pay stub. And then at the end of the year, I would get a tax return and actually get some money back. And basically, this was back when maybe like get a couple $1,000 back or whatever, right? And what that means is that the government owed you money that entire year, and you gave them extra money that you probably could have used, and you did that at a 0% rate for them. So they got they got an interest rate free loan from you for the entire year. And if you look at not just the interest free rate, but also there's an opportunity cost there. So, Jor, if you actually want to throw up this tweet here, this is somebody doing. That's my tweet, but I'm going to share this one instead. This is somebody actually experimenting exactly with this. So, in what they did is they had a time where their taxes were taken off paycheck by paycheck. They asked their employer to change that, and they knew exactly how much money they would have to put away for taxes. And all they did with that was buy Bitcoin every single paycheck instead of save that in a savings account and have that money to pay taxes at the time. And essentially, they timed it really well with a nice bull market. And now they have a tax return due instead of a return that they're getting money back for. They owe $9,500. But their Bitcoin is significantly higher than this. So they could sell a portion of their Bitcoin to pay this. And they're kind of, maybe thinking a little bit more like, how do I borrow against my Bitcoin at this point? Because I don't even want to sell it. And I could get if the interest rate is low enough, my Bitcoin could outperform the interest rate and I could still pay my taxes. So there's kind of a little bit of an interesting play here. You could do it with Bitcoin. You could do it with basically anything. Like even even an interest rate loan that is, or like even a savings account that pays you a little bit of money, like you still have more money at the end than if you were to just pay every single month. And yeah, being a business owner for the last 8 years, I always wait until like literally the last day to pay my taxes, and I keep all that money invested the entire year so that the tax burden ends up not being as much.
I think that, well, people may or may not know that I used to be an accountant. I was a CPA before I found Bitcoin. Excuse me. And so I dealt with a lot of taxes, both corporate taxes and personal taxes. And the one thing that's always blown my mind within taxes, especially for people who aren't as familiar with it, and I think that, we go through school, we go through the system. They intentionally don't really teach us too much about both money and taxes for that reason, because it is basically an interest-free loan to the government. And the thing that really boggles my mind every year is not only that people are super excited to get a refund, but they think it's like this random mystery of like the CRAs pulling names out of a hat and deciding how much they're going to get from their taxes back. Like basically how it works, like very simply, you every week you earn money, your employer or your payroll department bases how much you got paid. They set a rate on that based on your last year's or however much you want to take off from your check. So if you end up paying more taxes than you actually owed, that's what causes a refund. I know that there's tax credits and other things, but for the most part, that just means that you paid too much tax throughout the year. So there's a very simple fix to that. And that is basically just go into your payroll department or whoever writes you checks every week from your work and just say, hey, I got a big refund this year. I don't want to pay as much tax during the year, and get them to decrease or reduce your payroll taxes, your income tax remittances that you pay on every check. It's pretty simple. They're not going to tell you no. You just have to kind of take the initiative and go do it. And so kind of the example that I like to think about is if you were getting, let's say, $2,000 every 2 weeks based on last year's, and you ended up with a big refund, that means that you paid too much taxes throughout the year. So every two weeks you get $2,000, and then you go to your payroll department and say, I want to pay a little bit less tax during the year. So now you get $200 extra. So you're getting $2,200 now. You could take that $200. You could do whatever you want with it, but the most important thing there is that you hang on to it. You earmark it. You could put it in Bitcoin. You could put it in something else, but make sure you don't spend it, essentially, because that's when you're going to run into issues next year. So as long as you go to your payroll department, ask them to take a little bit less tax off, expect that you might be paying tax next year, but also understand that you got the benefit of that throughout the year, and you're actually able to invest that in something like Bitcoin, as Forrest kind of alluded to there. So that's kind of my thought process on it. Do you guys have anything else to add?
I wanted to actually mention something a little bit off topic. I know we're talking about the Bitcoin, investing in Bitcoin, to and avoiding the taxes in the immediate term, but something a little different. People actually don't understand how taxes work. Like, they don't understand the basics. They think that if you work more, if you work overtime, you're paying more taxes. But that's not really true. It goes back to what you were saying there, Jor. In that period of time, let's say, for example, in that 2-week period, you get, let's say normally your 2-week period, you get $2,000. In that 2-week period, if you do overtime and you get paid $4,000, it's almost like your company is calculating your income as earning $4,000 for the entire year.
Yep.
Then they try to figure out your tax rate, and then they withhold that amount. So what you could do is keep working your overtime. Maybe do what Jor said. Tell your HR department to recalculate how much money they withhold for you. I'm not sure of the exact process of that, but I think that could really help with you not getting taxed the way that you think you are. A lot of people think that if you work extra, then you're going to get taxed more, and that's not worth it.
Right.
But it's not true. It's not true at all.
No, it's not based on your 2 weeks at a time. It's based on your taxable income for the whole year. So
Yeah.
if you have a job, it's always the income that you make, any money that you take in, less any expenses that you had. And for most employees, if you're getting like a T4 every year, you don't really have any sort of expenses. So as Rajat said there, it's not based on your 2 weeks and how much overtime you worked during those 2 weeks. That's what your taxes get deducted at for that paycheck, which is usually why you end up with more of a tax refund, because you overpaid during the year. You gave the government an interest-free loan. So I think that if people started looking at that way, I would honestly, like, if I was an employee again, I would tell my employer, the payroll department, to take much less tax throughout the year. Even though it's gonna sting next season, you just have to be prepared for that. You're gonna owe a bunch of taxes. But if you manage that properly, and depending where we are in the Bitcoin cycle, you can really make bank with that. You can essentially increase your salary if you do it properly, and if you're very, what would you call it, responsible with it. Know that you're gonna owe. You have to know that. It's not like you're gonna get tax taken off throughout the year, get more net income every 2 weeks, and still get a refund. You're going to owe. It's not a random thing. It's a very objective calculation based on how much income you made throughout the year.
Yeah. So maybe a little too late with tax season being right here
Right.
to think about this too much, but it's, taxes are on the mind of a lot of people. And yeah, you can if you're an employee, you can maybe think about managing your own money a little bit better, managing your income, because yeah, taxes are a part of that, allocating to that, figuring out how to do that best. And maybe it allows you to invest a little bit more, and of course be strategic about it, as George said.
All right, I want to actually go into a different topic. I want to talk
Yep.
about. So I had a conversation with a real estate investor. If you, I don't know if you saw it. Anybody in the chat, I don't know if you saw it, but it was basically me versus. I was talking to Brian about how everything trends to zero in terms of Bitcoin, and you don't need real estate in your portfolio in order to build wealth. So his side of the argument was essentially that um, in terms of Bitcoin, real estate investors don't care about the value of their property. They only care about the value in terms of real estate. And I want to talk about how, or sorry, in terms of, they only care about the value in terms of US dollars. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how everything trends to zero in terms of Bitcoin. I think that's a really difficult concept for most people to understand. Most people don't get it. They're looking at the world from a fiat currency perspective, from a fiat currency lens, when they should be looking at it from the perspective of real money. Before Bitcoin, that was probably gold. I think gold was probably the best way to measure value before Bitcoin. But now, even gold trends to zero in terms of Bitcoin. At some point, you could buy 1 ounce of gold with 1 Bitcoin. Today, you're getting something like 30 ounces of gold for 1 Bitcoin. Eventually, that'll be 300, then it'll be 3,000, and eventually it'll keep decreasing because the amount of Bitcoin is finite, while the amount of gold in the system will keep increasing. Same thing with real estate, same thing with stocks, same thing with everything. People will say that, okay, there's a comment there, real estate
Mhm.
provides tax benefits. But if you look at it from the perspective of Bitcoin, those tax benefits are fake, because the only reason why your government is able to give you those tax benefits is because they can borrow more money. They wouldn't give you those tax benefits if they couldn't borrow more money. If we go to a Bitcoin standard, if the world actually starts denominating things in Bitcoin, those tax benefits are not going to exist. So
I'll
I
also
think, go ahead, go ahead.
I'll also just say that I think those tax benefits are a risk as well, because those are baked into the valuation of real estate. And if those are just laws by the current government. If those change in any material way, that means that that's going to be reflected in the price of that asset that you then hold. So that means that value is going to go down. So that's an additional risk as well, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then somebody said there, real estate in a good location is finite. Not really. If your neighbor sells their property and then their neighbor sells their property and then their neighbor sells their property and a developer builds a condo in their place, how is that real estate still finite? How do you know that in the future they're not going to be building deeper and deeper into the ground and increasing the supply of real estate in that location? It's not finite. It's not even close to finite. Real estate is something that you can create at will if you want to. If you have the labor, the resources, you can create more of it if you want to. So it's not finite at all.
Yeah. And I would say it's maybe more non-fungible. Each piece of real estate has
Yeah.
its uniqueness, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's finite. And those things are, it's hard. I mean, this is why it's such a good conversation, the debate about real estate of Bitcoin, is because there's all these sorts of nuances and sticking points for people. And we've all been taught. I mean, you know, again, George talked about our, you know, the financial education we have growing up. We have nothing about taxes, income, any of this, but we all kind of get instilled that real estate's a good investment. And we have to decouple from that belief and that understanding and start to realize that I think, you know, Martin says it really well in the comment section here. He said, fiat trends to zero, therefore, so does real estate. Real estate is tied into the fiat system so much. And if we're switching to a new monetary system, which is Bitcoin, then that is what we have to compare it to. And when you compare Bitcoin to real estate, Bitcoin wins out every time because it's raising in so much more value than the fiat denominated real estate is.
Yeah, there's a question here from Liz about why the push, and I think Rajat will probably cover that. Probably something to do with the government and the banks and how much money they make off it. But before that, I just want to kind of simplify things a little bit for people like me who don't necessarily, know the ins and outs of the real estate market and everything like that. This is how I look at it. I look at Bitcoin as a real asset. Real estate is a fake asset. And the reason I say that is because as technology improves, right now we have Tesla, who is making robots to create more robots. And that's just going to become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper because those robots are going to be able to build houses. And we're going to have a whole bunch of more new technology that's going to be able to print houses in the future or print parts of a house in the future.
3D printed houses. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, totally.
And so when you have something like that is apparently scarce right now, and yes, you might say that there's proof of work that goes into houses. That's one of the main arguments there. But as that proof of work becomes easier and easier, and it's easier to create real estate, you compare that to something that you cannot create more of. So when you're thinking about this stuff, there's going to come a time in the future, I believe, where we're not going to be able to trade real things, Bitcoin, for fake things anymore. And I don't know what that world looks like, but it's coming. Because when you just simplify things and say, what can you create more of as demand increases? And what can you not create more of as demand increases? And the only thing there is Bitcoin that you cannot create more of, irregardless of demand.
Yeah, and voluntarism is just ripping us with his BCH talk. A lot of it doesn't really make any sense. But there's a comment that he made about real estate that's relevant here. So he said houses should get cheaper because more of them should be made. That doesn't happen because of government interference. Completely agree. So real estate government members of parliament are real estate investors. They own real estate. They don't want their real estate to be devalued. So 100%. It happens because of government interference. So we'll go to Liz's question there. Got to ask why they push the narrative of real estate being the best investment. So I think part of it is because if as house prices go up, more people see the country that they're in, the land that they're on as being valuable. So they want to move there. So let's say, for example, if house prices in the US didn't go up so much, the US probably wouldn't seem as prosperous as it does. Right? Because if most people don't own if most people own houses and the price of their savings doesn't go up, people probably may not want to go there, essentially. Right? And then on top of that, property taxes can't go up. On top of that, banks can't earn as much interest as they want to, as they do right now. I think the Ponzi scheme is pretty much dependent on banking. The entire Ponzi scheme is dependent on banking, and then banking relies on real estate as collateral. So the push towards owning real estate is, in a way, I mean, I think it's to keep us working.
Yep.
Right. Go ahead, Jor.
I was just going to say, like, one of the most basic things that I would say 95% of the population does not understand is how much houses actually cost. Like if you had a mortgage for $500,000, people don't really realize that only the payments you make, only a portion of that actually goes into the $500,000 principal payment. The rest of it, half of it, if not more, is just an interest that goes to the bank for lending you fake pieces of paper. Yeah. So if you had a $500,000 mortgage, you probably end up paying $1 million or 1.1 or $1.2 million for that house with your principal and your interest after the 30 years is up. And I think it's one of the biggest scams in history, other than, let's say, income taxes, but it's right up there. People are just, you see the house, the price of it, but at the end of it, you end up paying more than double for that house with interest included in that.
Yeah. And that's the financialization of housing, right? This is in Canada, it's a huge business, right? If you look at the top 10 companies in Canada, all five of the major banks are near the top. And that's because they deal so much with Canadian real estate. There's so much financialization of even the repackaging of mortgages and lending them out, like all that happened in 2008. None of that stopped. Like the mortgage-backed securities, that's all still out there, and all of that facilitates basically financial income for all of these major institutions, and all of that ends up being tax receipts for the government. So the government has an incentive to keep real estate inflating, and all of it is just tied into this terrible fiat system that uses real estate as an investment. None of us are arguing that real estate is worthless. It's worth something. It just needs to trend towards its utility value. And I think the world would be much better off because if that happens. And we could use something like Bitcoin that doesn't affect any other people's like cost of living. There's no direct effect. Nobody lives in their Bitcoin. So if we use something like that as a savings tool, as an investment, then we wouldn't need to raise the cost of all of these other things that have monetary premiums over them.
Yeah. And okay, so I wanted to show this here. And I know a lot of people probably haven't looked at a compound interest calculator before, but what this shows you is if you borrow a certain amount of money, how much interest you're paying on that money, and then how much your payments are going to be every month. So let's say, for example, you buy a $625,000 house, you put down 20%, you're going to be paying 6.62%. This is the current interest rate in the US. So over 30 years, you borrowed 500K, you paid the bank 651K.
Cool.
So people might say, "Oh, it's good because it can be rented," but the bank at the end of the day, the bank gets $651,000. It doesn't matter how they get it, whether you work for it or somebody else works for it. If you work for it, you're going to notice the pain of having to earn that $3,200. But if you have a tenant, you're not going to give a shit about them. You don't care about them because all you see is the paycheck. All you see is that the money is coming in. That's all you care about. But at some point, somebody has to work to make that money. Whether it's your tenant or it's you, somebody has to work for that money and the bank benefits from it. So that's why this massive push is being made to buy real estate. That's why for the last 50 years, more and more people are buying real estate. People will continue wanting to buy real estate. And I did a little bit of research on the returns on real estate, and the returns are actually a lot lower than people think. I don't know where the link here is. I think I might have closed it, but the returns on real estate are around 3 to 5%. So if you're borrowing 20, if you put 20% down and you borrow 80%, let's say your return is 3%. Your actual return will be 15% because you're multiplying it by 5. So your actual return will be 15%. You're putting in so much time, so much effort,
Yes.
so much. You're putting in all of this, and plus you have to still pay this interest. You still have to pay for maintenance. You still have to pay for realtor fees. You still have to pay for lawyers. You still have to pay for appraisals. You have to pay for loan initiation fees. You have to pay for all of that. And that's not included in that 3 to 5% is gross. So after you subtract all of that, what's your return really going to be? Is it going to be 5%, 6%, 7%? Of course, at some point you have a paid off house, but in terms of Bitcoin, the value of that house is going to be much, much, much less than what it's worth today. So let's say you have a house worth 5 Bitcoin today. At some point, that house is going to be worth 0.1 Bitcoin. And I think that could happen within the next 20 years.
Yeah, a couple of things I would say on that, because I sold my rental house to buy Bitcoin in 2021. And that was one of the main reasons, is because, it's a pain in the ass, number one. But if you look at your income statement from your real estate, the return on that, when you're trying to figure out how much of if it's a good investment or not, I feel like most people don't actually include their own time in that calculation, because it's not like an actual payment like a salary would be for a business. You spend a lot of time finding tenants, going through applications, fixing things, changing the carpet or the flooring, whatever that may be. You put a lot of time into that, and that's not included in that return. Most people don't factor their own time into that either. So it would actually be much less than that return. Um, and so, yeah, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Plus, the other thing for me was that even if you managed to get like a 4, 5, 6% return on your real estate, okay, well, wait 15 or 20 years when you have to dump that into a new roof, and all of a sudden that's completely wiped out.
Yeah.
Or the
And
water
you have to
heater
have the
blows one
you have to have the
weekend and you
cash
got
on the
to
side too.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
You're forced to. Like, you can't get away with not having cash on the side. I've had a friend who had one property that, like you said, he had some issues with it and he lost 40 grand. And he basically had to his situation got so bad that he almost had to he had to claim bankruptcy because of this rental property that he had a tenant in who didn't want to pay. And it just got worse and worse. And he had to go to court, he had to pay for lawyer fees and everything. And of course, he didn't get anything out of the tenant because the tenant was broke.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. And so that's from a tenant's perspective. But the other part too here that I want to mention is because from the bank's perspective too, this is, I know the banks love real estate because they get a nice return on it. But if the housing market ever goes south, which it probably will, we've seen a lot of volatility in the real estate market through the years. But if you can't make your mortgage payments, if your tenants move out, as Rajat suggested there, or they just stop paying you, you still have to come up with that cash. And if you don't have that cash, you're going to default on your mortgage. And at that point, the bank has to step in and find a buyer for that house, which is also a huge headache for them. That's why Bitcoin not only is a better investment from our standpoint, but that's why it's going to become pristine capital collateral from the bank's perspective. Because if you stop making your mortgage payments, the bank just starts selling some of your Bitcoin. They can do that in 5 minutes to any person on the planet. And that is such a huge shift in this whole paradigm thing here.
Yeah. And somebody said there, the only person that doesn't lose in this situation is the bank. 100%. The bank
Yeah.
is the only one that truly benefits, because even as a tenant, even as a landlord, you get cash flow, but think about the headache that you're going through. So you are getting wrecked. But keep in mind, I'm not talking about residential homes. Like, I'm not talking about
Right.
your primary residence. I'm talking about rental properties. Having your own home is, of course, going to be better for you because it gives you the stability. You get to take advantage of that mortgage, right?
Mhm.
You're Somebody said here you get to buy a house with somebody else's money. Even that, I mean, that's a wealth transfer. It's a transfer of wealth from the person who doesn't understand the financial system to somebody who does. So when BlackRock is buying as many houses as they can, they're borrowing as much money as they can to buy those houses. They're getting basically free loans. That's a wealth transfer from us, the people who are basically depositing our money at the banks, and then the banks are giving that loan to BlackRock. That's a wealth transfer from us to BlackRock. That's what the real estate market is dependent on. It relies on that. It is built on that. It's built on making one group of people, a small group of people, very wealthy while everybody else suffers.
Mhm. The other thing here too, like you mentioned, the banks being able to profit from this and sort of win from this agreement, they don't have any real cost of capital. It's not like they actually really had to come up with the money for you to lend to you for you to buy the house. They just spin that out of thin air. It costs them absolutely nothing except the mortgage lender's salary, and to keep the lights on and everything like that. But that is money that is just created out of thin air, and they earn a certain rate off of you, and it costs them absolutely nothing, which goes to, and that's part of the debasement of currency as well. It's a completely unfair system that banks totally get an advantage from being so close to the money printer, deciding who gets credit creation and who doesn't. It's just totally messed up.
Yeah. And then on top of that, there are other issues where I saw on here somebody said most tenants won't respect your property. They don't care if they make a hole in the wall, right?
Hmm.
You took their deposit, and if their deposit doesn't cover that
Yeah.
damage that they caused, how are you going to sue them, right? What if they have no income? What if they don't have a job? What if they lose their job? What are you going to do? um, make them your slave or something, right? What else are you going to do? There's nothing else that you can do at that point, right? You're
Tax
basically
them.
you're screwed, right? Yeah, like what are you gonna do? Put them in your basement or something like that? But in that case, I mean, you're just basically running like you're just running like a sweatshop in your basement because that's what you have to resort to. And then
Yeah.
people also say, oh, you can borrow against your house. What if the bank doesn't lend you against your house? The you're relying on the bank to do everything. You're trusting the bank. You're trusting that the system that works today is going to continue working later on. What if it doesn't? There's all these things that you're making. This is why I think that real estate is speculation.
Oh yeah. Oh, big time.
It's complete speculation.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a crazy thing to me is like people think that their houses are going up in value. If you actually looked at the charts, the average returns or increases in prices, it's pretty much identical to the amount of money that's been printed since that time. Like it's not above it. It might even be below it.
It is below it.
It's below
Yeah.
it? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing is like people think that their house is going up in value when they've literally done no work to it. It's probably in shittier condition than it was when they bought it. And
Yeah.
their neighborhood hasn't changed at all. But for some reason, it's just gone up in value. And you might say, yes, there's more immigrants coming into the country. Partially, there's more demand for housing. But at the same time, there's a ton of real estate going up. In every city you drive through, there's condos. All these new developments of just condos stacked up to the sky. And you have to remember that. That's part of the real estate. The key here is that they can just create more of it. You just compare it to things that they can create more of if there's demand, and things they can't create more of if there's that same demand. And it's Bitcoin, and then there's everything else.
Yeah, so you definitely don't want to be the last one out, right? It's like a bubble. It's like a Ponzi scheme. It's if there ends up being an equilibrium where there's actually too much housing, what does that do, right? That creates
Exactly.
a huge problem for anybody that's been treating it as an investment. You're not going to have that problem with Bitcoin. It just Bitcoin, when there's too many sellers, it does go down, but it gets the system just gets worked out so fast compared to real estate, which can just have this cascading effect.
Because it's
And
global, right? It's
yes,
not local. It's global.
it's liquid too, so you can sell it, you can buy it immediately. With real estate, you just have to guess what the value is basically from other things that have been sold. You hope to sell it quickly. You pay realtor fees. I mean, it's just brutal. I mean, yeah, it's totally not worth investing in my opinion. I agree with you guys both that it's worth owning your own home for your own like sovereignty and feeling of, being able to build your home and all that, but as an investment, it's just a nightmare in my opinion.
I also
Yeah.
don't think that people should just be buying houses either, because you have to factor in everything. And a big part of it, especially here in Canada, is the property transfer tax, I believe. It's like a pretty significant amount. Like it ends up being like 5 or 6 thousand on like an average house. So if you're not going to be in your house for like the next 10 years, you're going to waste money on that
Oh yeah.
property transfer tax right off
The
the hop.
land transfer
Land
tax.
transfer, that's what it
Mhm.
is. What a
So
scam
bullshit.
that is.
It's so all they're doing is updating something in their books, and they're charging you like 1% of the property
It's
value. That's
nuts.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's a way to isn't that technically a way to make real estate less liquid so that people don't actually see so that there's really no um what is it called? Price discovery?
It would definitely make it less liquid because people are less likely to sell it if they just paid
Right.
6 grand for this transfer tax 2 months ago.
So they're
Yeah,
forced to hold for a few years. And then on top of this,
definitely.
so a lot of people keep saying, "Oh, real estate is there's a shortage of housing. There's a shortage of housing." There's no shortage of housing. There's absolutely no shortage of housing. People just buy more houses because they see them as a savings account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can build more houses if we want to. This is from a website that's about home ownership. Millions of houses are sitting vacant. So what's happening here is people are buying. So we can see here,
9% of
recreation.
homes.
Yeah, 9%
Whoa.
considered vacant. So 9% are considered vacant. Of course, a lot of them are probably like in escrow, for example. Maybe
Sure.
somebody's trying to sell it and they've moved out to stage the property. There's properties that you can't live in. They're just they're damaged beyond repair. But then there are also recreational properties,
Hmm.
seasonal properties. People are buying these properties because they want to go them at some point,
Right.
right? Maybe they'll go there when let's say you're Canadian and you're a what's it called, a snowbird, something like that. But
Yep.
basically, you go to Florida when it snows here, and then you live there for 6 months, and then you come back.
Just like the geese.
Right? Wouldn't How many of those people, when they figure out how Bitcoin works, would rather sell that house, buy Bitcoin, and then rent whenever they want to go anywhere in the world? So instead of going to the same destination over and over again, maybe they can go to Thailand, maybe they can go to Japan, maybe they can go to anywhere in the world.
It's
Yeah.
going to
How
happen.
is
We're just at the point now where
Exactly.
people don't understand Bitcoin.
And
Yeah.
a lot of those people are retired. A lot of those people are already retired. They already have their income set aside. Eventually, they're going to pass away. They're going to okay. So let's say let's create a scenario here. So let's say your parents passed you a rental house. Would you sell it or would you keep it?
I would
I'd sell
sell
it
it.
for Bitcoin
I would sell it immediately.
As soon,
immediately.
I'd probably get them to sell it before it even got to that point.
Right. And
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen. And that's going to break everything. That's going to break everything. That's going
There's a
to completely it's going to destroy the entire housing market. It's going to completely change how much interest we pay on houses. I think that cap rates right now are way too low. So what I mean by cap rates is basically the discount rate on houses. It's like people look at it as like 4, 5, 6%. I think it should be like 20, 30% because of the risk that you're taking with housing.
right. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've been thinking about with the housing market is just generational change, like we kind of alluded to. There's a lot of boomers retiring, might be passing away at different times. They acquired very large houses, had large families. Millennials, Zoomers, even Gen X, there was a big shift in the way that what generations have been doing. Lot smaller families, a lot of different preference for dwellings. So with that, right, we talked about housing not being um, a fungible thing. Each house is unique, so each thing should be valued differently. If there's all these houses that nobody really wants because of the style, because of the size, because of all the other things that go into a house, then those either need to be torn down, which makes them a lot less valuable, or when they're bought, they're not desired, so again, less valuable. And a lot of that's going to get passed on, and a lot of people are going to try to just get rid of these things. I feel like there's going to be less want and need for owning homes, especially rental homes. And I think even even owning homes for yourself as well. I think that will shift, and generational shifts happen. It takes time for that because a lot of that happens with generations passing. But yeah, there's a lot of change each generation that passes. And
Yeah.
it's shifting towards Bitcoin. We can see this trend. We can visually see this trend. Every chart we look at, it's all shifting to Bitcoin. It's the
It
clear winner.
I think the key here is that it's not shifting to some random shitcoin. It's shifting
Yeah,
to BTC.
100%. The market has chosen. The network effect in money is extremely strong. People don't realize how strong the market effect or the network effect of money is. It's not like other things where there can be a duopoly and all of this. If Bitcoin is the most scarce, the most sought after, and there's the ability to do layer twos that are still peer to peer, and we don't need to broadcast every single transaction we have. In fact, we probably don't want to. We might want some privacy with our transactions. So large secure purchases, yeah, we want that validated on chain. Small, me shopping at a coffee shop or whatever, I'm fine to do that peer to peer in a Lightning channel. It's very easy to do it. It's just going to get better and easier to do as the technology develops further and further.
Yeah, and just a little pivot here. I know we talked about completely different topics
Yeah.
based on what Forrest was saying there. We're just
We've done pretty good.
flipping from yeah, I think we're doing pretty well. But what I wanted to show here is that this is what the mempool looks like right now. The
Yeah.
fees are at 12 cents per transaction. What would happen to these fees if we increase the block size?
Like what would be I mean, the argument right here, right now, is should we make the block size smaller? Like that's a legitimate argument people can have. And I actually just talked to Bitcoin Mechanic. He thinks the size should be 300 kilobytes, not 1 megabyte. It was just an arbitrary number that Satoshi made. And
Yeah.
right now, you could make that argument really fairly because there's a lot of block space right now. Fees are very low. The blocks could be smaller. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal.
Do you think that that's a I don't know. Like I see what you're saying. I see what he's saying. I think he's a very intelligent guy. So he probably is deeper in the weeds than me on this. But like nobody's here yet. That would be my main argument is like nobody's here yet. Nobody who is going to be using layer one in the future, like the big banks, like settlements between countries, the bigger payments. Like we individuals won't be using the layer one for anything. Most people won't ever own their own UTXO, in my opinion. But it's really hard to say just because the mempool's kind of dead right now that it's always going to be dead. I think that if you look at the global transfers around the world between countries, between banks, between all these different settlements, which Bitcoin layer one will be used for, nobody's here yet. So we can't really gauge it on today. I think that if in 10 years from now it's the same kind of thing, then yes, go smaller, but definitely should not be bigger than this.
Yeah, so his argument actually isn't really about the mempool size. It's more so it's twofold, and I might be butchering it, and probably he should speak for himself or anyone in that camp should. But my understanding of it really is that there's going to be a trade-off between higher transaction fees versus higher cost of hardware to run a node, and which one do you
Yeah.
value more? So if we want Bitcoin to be decentralized and secure, that means people running their own nodes. So if that becomes too expensive because of blockchain size, then there needs to be some sort of trade-off in that way. The other concept is that blockchain size kind of grows in this very kind of linear way, whereas Moore's law of computing power actually is like a kind of a curve. So there's going to be a potential where the block size will outrun the technological improvements of computing power. So again, there could be a period of time before Moore's law catches up to the block size growing, where some hardware is going to become obsolete and it might become more expensive to run nodes. So there's this temporary time in the future where that's a potential. So again, that's another argument for a smaller block size. To me, it's an interesting concept. I don't know enough about it to really fully have a formed opinion, but those are more of the two arguments rather than look at how empty the mempool is necessarily. Yeah.
Rajat, can you click on the mining thing at the top there, the little hammer? I think this
Yeah.
is definitely worth mentioning. And then scroll down a bit and go to the hash rate, view more there beside the hash rate to the right side.
Oh, there. Here. Oh,
Yeah, down. Yeah, there you go. And scroll up and go to, yeah, right there. So you can see this actually just happened last week. We hit a new no, stay here. Yeah, right there. We hit a new all-time high in Bitcoin hash power, which basically from its simplest form is the amount of electricity going into the Bitcoin network. So as people plug in miners into the network, that goes up. As people unplug miners from the network, that goes down. So we actually hit 1 zettahash this week.
Yeah.
And it took about, I think it was 2017 when we moved into exahash. So that's about 8 years it took in that exahash there. Yeah, you can see about 2017, I think it was, where we moved into exahash.
Oh,
Look
yeah,
at that
definitely.
chart.
There it is. Petahash to exahash.
Yeah. So we went from petahash to exahash, and we just hit zettahash this week.
Do you guys remember how big of a deal it was in like 2021 when China stopped mining Bitcoin?
You can see it right there, that little dip.
Yeah, you can see it. It's crazy small dip. That's in 2021 there, Rajat.
Right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
This one, right?
That's China unplugging its miners. And it looks like nothing now. That
And
was a
look what
massive
happened.
deal.
It
That was
went.
a
It went from
massive deal back then.
133. It went from 130. 130. What is it? Oh, 200. It went from 200 to 100 or so. 200 to
Yeah.
100. So it dropped
Cut
by
in half.
50%.
Yeah.
Got cut in half. And then after that, even though I mean, they didn't. It's not like they reverse. Did they reverse that? Did they allow
No,
mining to? Oh, so
those
it's still
miners
not.
just left
It's still
China.
not allowed. Wow. Okay. So even with that, it's 10x from there.
Yeah. Percentage wise, it was a big deal at the time, but
Wow.
that just really goes to show, that cliche of when in doubt, zoom out, right?
Yeah. And
And
okay, so I saw. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jor.
I was just to kind of close that out. I was just gonna say, like, that just goes to show how resilient this network is. When one of the biggest countries on the planet stops, like, bans mining, like, that's what people worry about. This thing's too good that governments are going to shut it down. Good luck. That's a perfect example of how resilient Bitcoin is. When China says you guys can't mine Bitcoin anymore, people just leave, and it basically gets back to where it was within 6 months, and then just skyrockets from there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I think that was a great way to close that off. So there's another comment on here that I'm seeing, and I think this is something that needs to be addressed. So voluntarism said here, full nodes that are not mining nodes are pretty useless. You need hashing power for them to be useful. I don't quite agree with that because not everybody in the
Nope.
world has the financial means to buy miners.
Yeah.
Mining
It's just
equipment costs money.
I completely disagree with that as well. It's you can if you can connect to your own node and validate your own transactions, send your own transactions using your own node, that's the use case. You don't need
Yeah.
to be connected to the mining network to do that.
Yeah, you don't need to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jor.
No, I was just gonna say, I couldn't find the comment there. I was looking for it, so
It
you
was
might as well
really
just
far up.
continue there, Rajat.
It was really far up. So the reason why
Okay.
I say that is because uh, you don't have to be able to create Bitcoin in order to use Bitcoin. So when miners are mining, they're creating Bitcoin. Not everybody needs to be a producer, but everybody should be a user in this case. So if you choose, you can choose to have a record of the blockchain on your computer, on your device, and you can confirm whether transactions are real. That's the point of running a node. That's not a miner.
Yeah.
Mining uses energy. Not everybody has the capability to provide energy to the network. So the comment that was there, I mean, it seems like it's just there's a lot of FUD here from that one person because I
Hmm.
think he's pushing Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a really great quote from Robert Breedlove. He says, "You can play chess, but would you play chess with somebody who changes the rules? Like
Yeah.
if somebody just completely changes the rules of a game, you have the choice of whether you want to participate in it or not. Then that's what Bitcoin Cash is."
100%. Yeah.
We get some good comments here, everybody. Holy cow! Big shout out to the chat today. Sorry, Forrest, did you have something to add to that? I kind of cut you off there.
Nope, not at all. Not at
Okay,
all.
let's take a little break here. Do you want to take that off the screen for a sec, Rajat?
Yeah.
Um,
Let's give a quick shout out to the QR code here. If you guys want to
yes.
support the show, you can send us Bitcoin over Lightning. That's for the Lambo Fund. It's a huge help. Really appreciate that. We also on Maple Bitcoin. If you guys are watching this on the Maple Bitcoin channel, we also are now eligible for super chats as well. So you can do that over YouTube.
And finally, we got Forrest has put all the shows up on audio. So
Oh
for
yeah,
all the audio lovers out there, we're now on Spotify, Fountain, Apple Music. You can enjoy all your favorite Maple Bitcoin clips and live streams in strictly audio. And we got a fat zap that just came in. So I guess we should have maybe mentioned it at the top of the show. But somebody just sent in 12,000 sats to the
Wow.
Maple Bitcoin fund there. So thank you. And make sure if you're sending a zap into the QR code beside Forrest's head there, you can also leave a little comment that we will read on the screen for you. So it's just kind of like a Bitcoin version of super chats. Kind of cool.
yeah.
One thing I did want to mention here, boys, sorry, before we go any further into a new topic, we posted a question on the channel the other day. And so I wanted to give a shout out to everybody who responded to this. Keep an eye out for more of these. We're going to be sharing more of our thoughts and stuff on Twitter, on Nostr, on YouTube. But the question was, where do you listen to Maple Bitcoin shows, clips, and podcasts? On the commute, in the shower, mowing the grass, lifting the weights? I said, one lucky respondent will get a shout out on Friday stream and some sats for their trouble. So the winner of this week, right here, Wiper. I
Can
don't
you
know if
zoom in a
Wiper's
bit?
here or not today, but
Can you zoom
they
in?
said that. Sorry, what was that?
Can you zoom in?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. That better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Wiper said, I listen while on my long walks. You guys are great to listen to, especially while on a journey of self-improvement. It feels like hanging out with a group of Bitcoiners to nerd out with, which sadly is not something I get in my daily life. So thank you, Wiper, for the comment there, for the feedback. We got a bunch of good feedback there. And so Wiper, I don't know if you're here or not today watching, but if you are, put your Lightning address in the chat, and we'll send you some sats.
Sweet. That's awesome. And also, I mean, I've been doing some in-person Bitcoin meetups. I mean, that comment reminded me of it, and they have been so rewarding and so nice. And it as a Bitcoiner, you get in your group of friends or your family, you feel like the odd one out. You kind of feel a bit weird. You go to a Bitcoin meetup, you feel totally normal because everyone's just as weird and just as crazy as you are about this thing. So it feels really good to be amongst Bitcoiners. So I don't know, maybe Orange Pill app, check out the events or look online. Maybe there's something near you. I don't know. But
The one thing I'd say about that is absolutely, I think that there's no better initiative that you could take on as a Bitcoiner than just to set up either attend or set up, and that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed in the last couple of years and beyond in my life is that if something doesn't exist that you want to do, create it yourself.
totally.
Be the person who organizes that. In this case, it's Forrest. He's either organizing or co-organizing these events that didn't exist before, but instead of complaining about it or wishing something would happen, he just did it. So
Yeah.
that I think that's good advice for Bitcoin and in life. If you want something that isn't there, just start it yourself. You have the ability to.
You might be surprised. I mean, I live in a small town. We had 9 people show up at the meetup this week. So yeah.
I think one thing people say is it holds them back. They say, "Oh, it's too saturated," or "It's too difficult to start,"
Mm,
and "It's too expensive. I don't have the money. I don't have the time." All those things are just holding you back. I hear so many people talking about how um, they're not going to start a YouTube channel because it's too saturated, it's oversaturated. No, that's
Sure.
not the point. The
yeah.
point is to get your thoughts across from your perspective. And there's always going to be someone who wants to learn from you. There's always going to be someone who wants to see the world from your perspective. It's like with forest meetups. So there's probably a lot of other meetups in your town. Maybe there are, maybe there aren't. But if you start a meetup now, there are going to be people who learn from that, who are encouraged by that. Maybe they start their own meetups,
Yeah.
and it's a different style of meetup, right? So everything there's no such thing as oversaturation. There's no such thing as too many Bitcoin educators. There's no such thing as too many Bitcoin meetups. 99% of the world has no idea what Bitcoin is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've been talking about more, and I think that this is important to kind of to talk about a little bit further because I mean, at this point, to me, Bitcoin is inevitable. It's going to be the future reserve currency of the planet. The one thing that we have the ability to change is how fast that adoption happens and who owns the coins. That's kind of what's up to us right now, right? So Michael Saylor talks about all the time, Team Bitcoin. Everybody's on Team Bitcoin. All you have to do is buy Bitcoin, and you're a part of the team, and you win, which is true. But I think that people should actually look at it from a slightly different perspective and say, okay, on every team, there's different positions. There's a centerman, there's wingers, there's D-men, there's goalies, there's fans in the stands, there's owners, there's the janitor at the arena. Ask yourself which part of the team, which role are you playing right now? Whether that's an advocate, whether you have a channel, a podcast, a blog, whatever it is. Are you an advocate or an educator? Or are you a supporter? Or are you a miner? Just ask yourself which one you are and just try to do that a little bit better because that's going to speed up the adoption. It's going to help us move away from fiat quicker. And that's what we want here.
Yeah, it builds that circular economy where you remove a lot of the waste, you remove a lot of the extraction of value, and if you're, let's say, a merchant, for example, if you that's part of the Bitcoin network, being a merchant. If you accept Bitcoin, you're
Yes.
basically taking power away from Visa, MasterCard. You're removing some of the fees that they're going to take from your customers in order to transact with you. Like, I was thinking about it a few days ago. So there was something that I paid for, and I noticed Visa and MasterCard are doing nothing. Literally, all they're doing is updating a spreadsheet, and they're taking 3% of the transaction.
Yep.
If we can eliminate them somehow, that's huge. That would change so much. Or if we force them to lower their fees and then start transacting with Bitcoin. Visa is just a layer on top of fiat, right? They can easily transition to Bitcoin,
Yes,
and
exactly.
more merchants is going to make that happen.
Yeah, and your point there, Rajat, is perfect because you could say as a merchant, I kind of named three: the advocate, the supporter, the what else did I say? I don't even know. But there's also like different ways to do it. A merchant accepting
Miner, you
Bitcoin
said.
would be one.
Yep.
Supporting merchants who accept Bitcoin would be another. That'd be a supporter. I would say that like a miner at home, like running a BitAx or two, would help decentralize the network. That's part of the team here to push this thing forward. A node runner running your node. We got some good questions in chat about nodes. So yeah, we'll maybe talk about that. We're about an hour into this. I would say that we'll spend a good chunk today answering some questions.
Yeah.
So with that, we got a couple here, and we got another zap too, boys. 5,000 sats with an orange heart.
Wow.
Thank
Nice.
you.
Beautiful.
So where should we begin here, boys?
Let's start
You
with
want to
that
get
first
some
question.
questions? Or you got any more topics?
Let's go into the questions. I like that first question. BTC
Yeah, let's get
doesn't
the
fail.
questions. We also should get to the node stuff at some point as well.
Yeah, let's do that actually because that was a super chat.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, I see it.
So the question here from Nav, $5 super chat. Thank you, Nav. Said advice on getting a node and running it. I hear Start9 is good. I have an old Mac Air. Can I run a node on it? Do you guys have much experience with this?
So for me, I literally just I've been running a node for a long time just on my computer, literally the computer I'm using right now. And I just switched over from Bitcoin Core to Knots. Took 2 days to download the full blockchain. I just connected it to Sparrow. It's incredibly easy, and you can do that with a Mac as well. So you might be able to run it on an old Mac Air. Depends on probably the hard drive space is going to be your limiter there. Because MacBook Airs are pretty compact. So I don't know what kind of hard drive you have. That's probably going to be your limitation, but you could get an external hard drive. An SSD would probably be the way to go on that. And you could run it on a device like that, or you could get a dedicated server, like something like a Start9 would be another way to do it, which is it's basically a Linux computer with Start9 OS on it. Again, you can build all these things yourself. It's pretty easy. What I just did with running my own node is like the easiest possible way you could do it. And I will have a video coming out soon. It's you download one thing, you type in one thing, it's connected, you're running your own node. Again, Voluntarism or whatever that guy's name is talking about how unfriendly, how hard it is to run a node. It is not hard to run a node at all. It can
So
be
easy.
It can be more difficult. You can go down and do all sorts of different things, but to run a very simple node, it is so easy.
I think you can do it with like $100 worth of equipment. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do it off a Raspberry Pi and an old hard drive. Yeah, that'll work for a certain amount of time potentially. Again, that the hardware might become a limitation if you go on the cheaper end at a certain point in the future.
Yeah, I got a couple different thoughts on this. I'll give you my experience so far and my journey through Bitcoin. So I went about 4 years, 3.5, 4 years before I started running a node myself, which you might say that is too long. And you'd probably be fair to say that. I'm kind of under the opinion though, if you're first getting into Bitcoin, I think your money is much better spent actually just buying Bitcoin. I think that there's enough stuff to learn within Bitcoin, both buying it, securing it, sending it, receiving it, all that stuff. There's so much to know. And I think that, as Bitcoin continues to go up and up and up, I just think that your money is better spent buying Bitcoin right now. Once you get through a couple of years, I mean, there's people who pick this stuff up quicker than I would. And that's kind of what I was going to say to volunteerism too. There is like, if I can do it, like the most non-technical guy on the planet can set up a node, then anybody can do it. It's super simple. And maybe just to kind of step back a bit, for anybody out there who's watching the show that doesn't really know what running a node means, it's basically just downloading a copy of the Bitcoin ledger onto your computer. That's like a very simple way to put it. Every transaction that has ever happened since January 3rd, 2009, you have a copy of all those transactions that gets downloaded to your computer. And so that's how people verify it. That's how the transactions are validated. It helps secure the network. That's why it's so decentralized. That's why it's immutable. Because if you wanted to make a change to one of the transactions, you'd have to go to every single node around the planet and ask them to make that change, which isn't going to happen. So that's what I would say is don't rush into it. It's definitely a very important part of Bitcoin. I will not understate that, both for privacy and decentralization of the network. And I have a Start9 here that I've been running, and I was able to figure it out quite easily. If anybody's out there, I'm just sharing a link right here in the chat. You can go check out start9.com and you can use code 88 sats and get like $50 or $60 US off of your purchase. So I would say that you don't have to do that. As these guys mentioned, there's much cheaper ways to do that. The Start9 is fairly expensive. But the reason why I got a Start9 personally is because you can do different things with it too. It's basically your own server. So it's more private. I store my passwords on there. I buy and sell Bitcoin on there through RoboSats, which is connected privately through my server. And I also kind of understand and see where everything's going here. And so I just want to familiarize myself with the server because I think it actually is going to be a massive part of being sovereign in the future. As we kind of shift away from all these big corporations stealing our data, that data that we we visit a website, we make a purchase. In the future, we're going to be able to send all that data to our own servers instead of it going to like a centralized Twitter or YouTube or Google. We're going to be able to get that information ourselves. And we're actually going to be able to sell that data to companies. Whatever we want to sell, we can kind of package it together and sell it for Bitcoin in the future. That's kind of what I see. That's my vision of the future. And so I just kind of want to get ahead of that and familiarize myself with the server. So that's why I bought it.
Yeah, good call. Nav had a follow-up super chat here for $2. Node needed for cold storage. I hear mixed things. It isn't needed for cold storage. It's just you're using somebody else's node if you're going to be transacting. So again, what Jor mentioned there was sovereignty, and running your own node increases your self-sovereignty. So you're running your own node. You're not asking for permission from anybody through using their node. You're not broadcasting it through their node. You're broadcasting it through your own. So there's some privacy there, but it isn't needed. It's just recommended. And of course, it's more advanced. And yeah, all that, right? Basically what we've said as well, continued on there.
I think at the end of the day, though, I don't know if it's really. I mean, you can run a node. You probably should run a node if you want your own self sovereignty. But we have blockchain explorers like Mempool for a reason. Those blockchain explorers are constantly being looked at by people all around the world. I saw a mistake on Mempool one day, and somebody tweeted about it. I wouldn't have known unless they tweeted about it, right? So people are constantly looking. They're constantly comparing their node to Mempool because the incentive is to make sure that the entire world has the same record of transactions. So if there's a mistake on Mempool, somebody's going to point it out. I think at this point, I mean, you should run a node. You could run a node. But at this point, I think the new people who aren't running nodes, I think they're fine without running a node, although it would be better, of course, to support the network, to give the network more support to make sure that there are more records of the transaction. So it's harder and harder to lie.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say to that too is, yes, in terms of verifying the transactions, verifying the fact that you actually do have the UTXOs that are in your wallet. That's kind of what Rajat was alluding to there, which can be done on Mempool, which is very well maintained. That's not really the issue that I would say for a lot of people. The issue that I would be concerned with is that when you're connected to a public node, every time you send a transaction, they get the information from your wallet. And with that comes your XPub. And if your XPub gets leaked somehow, that's a problem, because even if you're going through the best practices of privacy of sending it to a different wallet address every time, if your XPub gets exposed through that public server, then they now can see your whole balance within that wallet. So it just adds a layer of complexity in trying to manage and be more private. Whereas if you're connected to your own server, your own node, there's nobody that has access to your XPub. unless you kind of expose that to somebody yourself.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, that's a great point. We should move on. What was that first question that we didn't get to that we skipped? Should we go back to that one about the transactions?
I already unstarted.
Oh,
I saw something funny here in the chat. So he said,
oh, okay.
with worldwide adoption, I guarantee you that less than 0.00001% of the population will run a full node. So I did the calculation quickly. If there's 8 billion people on Earth. If this was the percentage, so it'd be 0.0000001 times 8 billion. That's 800 nodes. Right now there's something like 100,000 nodes. So
25,000.
25,000 reachable.
Yeah,
Right.
There's also
Yeah. That's right.
unreachable,
That's
right?
right.
So there's already over 100,000 from what I know, and there's probably more that we don't know of. So that means that right now the percentage is already higher than what voluntarism is saying here. So
And that's going to improve. That's going to increase, right?
it's going to
Yeah.
increase.
Like as more and more people start holding their own Bitcoin, as more and more people start understanding Bitcoin, as green lights come on around the world, that is going to increase significantly from the 100,000 that Rajat said there, probably to 1 million, then 10 million, then 50 million. And like realistically, if they are concerned with the verifying those UTXOs, the privacy without exposing XPubs to other people, every business on this planet is going to have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Every business on this planet is going to have its own team to manage their Bitcoin. So they will absolutely all be running their own nodes. And it's not a hard thing to do. You just need enough hard drive or space on your computer or your server. It's going to happen. We're just 16 years into this thing. We're 16 years AB after Bitcoin. So 25,000 or 100,000, either one, pretty
and it's
good.
going to keep getting cheaper, right? That's
Yeah,
the thing. It's going to keep
exactly.
getting cheaper because Bitcoin's the Bitcoin blockchain grows linearly while technology improves exponentially. So
Yes.
right now it costs you $100. Maybe in the future it'll cost you $75.
Yes.
Then it'll cost you $60 and $50. It'll get cheaper and cheaper.
Well, think about it. Think about how much it used to be for like a USB or like a floppy disk for like 5 megabytes.
Yeah.
And now we're talking like 4 terabytes. So as
Yeah.
technology improves, there's more storage, it costs less. That's just how the world works. So yeah, I think we should I don't want to block this guy, but we need to spend less time talking about BCH. I guess it's important for
Yeah.
people to understand though, right?
There's people who this actually gives value to, because there's probably
think so.
people who
Yeah.
are reading what he's saying and they're thinking maybe BCH is better than BTC and I'll sell my BTC and I'll buy BCH. But I think it's probably the worst decision that you can make. And we're talking about the reasons for that.
It's one of the worst decisions you could have made when the fork happened. The best
Yep.
decision you could have made was the exact opposite of that. Just sell your BCH that you got for free and buy more Bitcoin with it.
Yeah.
This is a great point from Cuddy. Once storage space increases on phones and you can easily run Node on your phones, Node runners will increase tenfold, 100%.
Yeah. Actually, let me share the chart for BCH to BTC just so that anybody who's even questioning it knows
I
what
think
we're
that the
we're
other
dealing
part
with
there
here.
too, Rajat, is like
Yeah.
people complain about the transaction speed, but we have other layers now. As I think it was Rajat that replied to that comment. We have layers now. So the whole value add for Bitcoin Cash, for Litecoin, for XRP, for all these other tokens has now been basically outdated by the fact that we can transact very instantaneously over Lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
This is
what's the
C90
chart here?
just said, is that a meme coin chart? And yes, yes, it is.
this is a chart for
Basically is.
BCH to BTC.
Yeah.
So at the high, you could buy 0.27 Bitcoin with 1 BCH.
Wow.
0.27 Bitcoin. We won't go with that. We'll go with the first price, the starting price. So the starting price was 0.15.
You
That
could buy
thing never
Yeah.
even thought about coming back to its all-time high.
It just
No,
keeps
there's no way.
dying. It keeps dying more and more. Like it has 9 lives. Like it comes back and then it dies again. It comes back, dies again. Comes back, dies again. Comes back, dies. It just keeps doing it over and over again.
Well, yeah, it can always keep dying, right? It can always go almost to zero.
It's
but never quite
brutal.
make
Like
it.
it's actually sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
I had
All
some
right.
BCH myself. I had two. And the only reason I think that there's a lot of people out there that hold like XRP, Litecoin, Solana for this same reason. I was like, well, if I can get two of these things, and someday, even if it gets to like 10% of Bitcoin, I'm going to be laughing. But the thing is that I didn't understand Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So now I know that it'll never come close to being 10% of Bitcoin. So I traded that Bitcoin Cash for Bitcoin and obviously have won the deal.
Yeah.
Great decision.
And the other thing too is just showing a chart. Some people will just say that doesn't really prove anything. It does, because that is market adoption. The market has decided that one of these things is worth more than the other, drastically more, and that's what we move towards. And if you look at the technological, like the technology of it as well, there's a lot more being built on Bitcoin for the future than on anything else, in my opinion.
I actually did an in-depth video on the importance of salability. So this chart shows you BCH's salability.
Right.
Salability is basically like it's basically the marketability of something as a form of money. So if we go back to the definition of salability, salability is the ability to be sold. So if over time your ability to sell BCH is decreasing, this is the definition, the ability to be sold. So
Yeah.
over time, the marketability of BCH is decreasing. Even in terms of Bitcoin, it's falling very hard because the market has decided that BCH is not money.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and these are protocols too. So when we talk about the network effect and how powerful the network effect is, the protocol of Bitcoin can be built on, and network means so much in that case,
Yeah.
where there's no competition, there's no internet two, there's no HTTPS two, there's just more protocol being built on top of these. These are not technologies like Facebook or Google or anything else that can see a competitor come up with a new technology. Protocols are very, very difficult to disrupt when they get entrenched, which we have already seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the one of the main things for me, anyways, is the just the amount of investment that's going into Bitcoin. So you could say that like with BlackRock coming into it, with the countries coming into it, you just have to think for a second here that all this capital is flowing into Bitcoin, but there's also going to be a bunch of investment into growing Bitcoin because these interests. First thing they need to do is acquire Bitcoin, which is hard for them at this point. But the second thing is they're going to want this thing to succeed. If they have all this capital tied up in Bitcoin now, they're going to want Bitcoin to succeed. So there's going to be not only investment into buying Bitcoin, but building on top of Bitcoin, right? Because there's not investments into XRP and BCH and Litecoin. And so there's going to be no incentive. There's going to be a huge brain drain I see happening right now from the fiat system moving into Bitcoin. And it's not the case with any other altcoins, especially not something like Bitcoin Cash. So you need developers, you need funding, you need investment for this thing to stay relevant and secure, right? So that's kind of how I look at it too. Is just like not the price, not the amount of people in it, but the actual the brain drain happening from the fiat system that used to kind of prop that system up. The brightest minds working in fiat are now
Mhm.
moving over to Bitcoin, and the more minds we have in Bitcoin, the more intelligence we have in Bitcoin, the more we can stop things like quantum attacks, physical attacks, hash rate attacks, stuff like that. So you want investment into whatever you're holding right there. And BCH doesn't have any of that from my perspective anyways.
It also doesn't have the market cap that can actually handle any amounts of serious of investment or holdings anyway. Like institutions are getting interested in Bitcoin partially because of the liquidity of the market and the value that is actually held there. So they can actually trade this market. They can buy, they can move, and they can have an exit if they ever need an exit without crashing the market, like some of these smaller cryptocurrencies that are pretending to compete against Bitcoin. Most of them don't pretend to compete against Bitcoin anymore, and there's a reason for that. Is because they have the same fate as Bitcoin Cash. They pretend to compete, or they try to compete against Ethereum, which doesn't compete against Bitcoin. It's a totally different concept at this point. So yeah, I don't know. I think we should maybe try to move on from this. It's a bit, you know, the same old conversation with against Bitcoin Cash, in my opinion. But
Yeah, let's go to Flux Capacitor's question there.
okay.
Hi, would you guys take out a HELOC to buy one Bitcoin at 8% interest or borrow on your 401k 35K at 0.5% for 4 years? I would
Interesting.
I would think that I think that the heat actually I don't know how you would get a 0.5% interest rate or 0% interest rate on your 401k. That's pretty I mean that's pretty great.
Yeah, how I've never seen that before. I mean, that
Yeah.
seems like a no-brainer. If somebody's giving you free money and you could
Yeah.
invest it in something, I mean, and you have it for 4 years, 4 years is a great time frame to hold Bitcoin. So that already seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that you have to look at this stuff very objectively and say what's the interest rate that you're paying, what's the rate of return on Bitcoin historically has been 40 to 50 to 60% every year. And anytime that you can get access to a loan that you can hold on to, like a longer term loan, you don't want to be taking on short term, 1 or 2 year, because lots can change in that. Bitcoin is very volatile and you have to be aware of that. But historically, if you've held on to Bitcoin for at least 4 years, you've always come out ahead. So anytime you're thinking about taking out dollars from the bank account, some free money to buy Bitcoin with, just make sure that the term is longer than 4 or 5 years, and you're probably going to be in a much better spot than you were before. So I always encourage that if you're able to get fake money and buy real money with it, and it kind of makes sense logistically, then I would say 100% go for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What else we have here in these starred questions?
I don't know. Oh, okay. Sorry, I
What
was
about the
just
hoodie
looking at
question?
The what,
this
sorry,
one.
Dor?
The
This
hoodie
question
question.
was put in here a couple
Oh,
different times here, so I
Oh,
figure
there
we
you
should
go.
get to this one.
okay.
Arslan said, "Can you please explain how Bitcoin is being secured on the second layer, and what are eCash and Cashew protocols?"
So I'm not completely familiar with the terms, but I mean, if you guys are familiar, maybe you can explain them a little bit better. I know a very surface level amount of information.
So, whenever you're using Lightning, you have to think about the fact that anytime you're able to spend and receive on Lightning, that Bitcoin has been taken off of layer one. So somebody out there is running their own Lightning node, and this gets really convoluted. I've never heard anybody explain this in a very simple way, Lightning versus layer one and how it all works together. But the way that it's secured is because in order to transact on Lightning, you actually have to take that Bitcoin off of layer one. That's a layer one transaction that gets sent to a Lightning node, and then all the different Lightning nodes around the world can send that Bitcoin around, but it's all taken off chain. So that's why it's secured. It's not like paper Bitcoin. It's not like more Bitcoin is being created. That Bitcoin has been taken off of layer one and put into a liquidity pool where people can send it around very quickly without having to deal with the challenges, the slowness, the cost of layer one.
So the way I would explain it actually is, I mean, that Bitcoin still exists on chain on layer one. It's just set into a smart contract, and
Right.
it's done that on chain, and then
It's
that
locked
total
up
amount,
essentially, right?
it's locked up into a
Yeah.
multi-sig smart contract, and then essentially anybody participating within that Lightning channel, and it's a routing system. The Lightning network is a routing system, so anybody can connect to anybody. I send directly to Jor. I've made a connection between our Lightning channels. And
Yes.
then Jor has connected to Rajat. I can now send to Rajat through Jor. And basically, the way it works is, say we lock up one Bitcoin in a Lightning channel, that is the total amount of transactions that we can send between each other, and it ends up being like an abacus. So I can send uh, zero point 0.2 Bitcoin, and then I can receive 0.1 Bitcoin, and that same Bitcoin just goes back and forth between this internal abacus and or internal ledger, basically, and it's peer to peer in that way. And then eventually that lightning channel can close, and that's just another transaction on chain, and whatever the balances in the lightning channel are get distributed to the right wallets on chain afterwards, that after that lightning channel is closed. The lightning channel can basically scale incredibly quickly, incredibly large without any restriction, because it's not a broadcast network like Bitcoin is, which is incredibly inefficient. Broadcast networks, blockchains, they're incredibly inefficient ledger systems, intentionally so, but they don't work really well. The technology of it doesn't work very well for fast, quick transactions. So that's what a layer two like Lightning is built for, and that's
Yeah.
how it kind of works.
What I want to show on this is everything that you guys said. That's great. What I want to, I just want to visualize it for Lightning. So basically, what you're doing is, let's say you send a transaction to somebody who's running a Lightning. Let's say you send a transaction to Bitcoin Satoshi. What's it called? Bitcoin. What's it called? The Satoshi's wallet.
Wallet of
Oh
Satoshi.
yeah,
So let's say you send Bitcoin to their address. They're going to hold that Bitcoin for you, and then they're going to, in the background, upgrade. They're going to update their spreadsheet to make sure that, well, not really spreadsheet, but they're going to update their database
It's
to
a
see
ledger.
who owns that Bitcoin. Right.
yeah,
So what you're doing is you're sending a regular transaction. It's like you're moving your Bitcoin from your address to another person's address. And that's exactly what you would do. So you would move it from, let's say, your address to somebody else's address, and then they would basically create their own Lightning. Uh, what is it called? A Lightning
Node.
node. Yeah. So you're basically sending it to them, and then they're just doing all of the transactions in the background.
Yeah, so basically the point of that is you send some Bitcoin off of layer one and into a Lightning wallet or a Lightning node. And the nice thing about that is instead of having to pay the transaction fees, which are usually quite high on layer one every time, you can take whatever Bitcoin you sent off chain into Lightning and you can transact with that as many times as you want to without having to pay a layer one fee every time. That's usually why people do it. I'd say that the biggest drawback of Lightning would be the challenges of running a node. I think that that is an area that does need to be improved within Bitcoin. But for the most part, like the main drawback there is you don't actually hold custody of that Bitcoin unless you run your own Lightning node. So there is potential that you could get rugged. Somebody could basically, there might be paper Bitcoin. It's hard to get into that though because that's just purely speculation. But that is the risk: is that you actually don't have the keys to that Bitcoin unless you're running your own Lightning node, and it is still very challenging and complex to run your own Lightning node. So if you're just dealing in small balances, like the QR code beside Forrest's head there, that's on Lightning. That's on layer two. You can send that very quickly and cheaply around without not having to worry about much. So what I would say is, unless you're running a Lightning node, don't keep too much Bitcoin on Lightning. Like
yeah,
for the most part, I'd say under 1 million sats. That's obviously going to decrease as Bitcoin's value increases, but that's usually my threshold is like 500,000 sats maybe. Just for that reason, there is the counterparty risk there. If you're connected to somebody else's Lightning node, you could get rugged. So just keep it small if ever you're using Lightning. And I highly encourage everybody to be using Lightning. Like I use Lightning every day on Noster, on stuff like this with the QR code there with Zapstream. I use Lightning every day. So for the people who say that you don't use Bitcoin or you can't spend Bitcoin, I literally do it every single day because of Lightning.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the question also asked about eCash and Cashew, which are another type of implementation of value transfer. So somebody could basically become an issuer of eCash if they run the software. You send them some sort of value. It was originally, eCash was actually built before Bitcoin, but it works really well with Bitcoin. So you would send an eCash issuer some Bitcoin, they would issue you eCash, and then you could send that eCash. And there's a lot of privacy within there. So the issuer actually doesn't have a lot of information. There's like some encryption and things like that that creates some
Blind
privacy.
signatures, I think it is, Forrest.
Yeah, exactly. Blind signatures. And so you can send this. It's very instant, very quick, very fast, all this. And you can create a, an eCash system, like a Fediment eCash system, where there's multiple people within there. So there's less likelihood of you getting rugged. And this is kind of like an idea that people have thrown around to create like a community eCash protocol or community fediment. And this also I believe it interacts with the Lightning Network as well, as far as with Bitcoin.
Yep.
So it's kind of an addition on that, which has potential privacy improvements and potential custodial situation improvements as well. But something that's a lot more developing and a lot less information, in my opinion, that I could find on it. So that's kind of where my knowledge limits out there.
I think one of the great things about Lightning is that, let's say you have multiple Lightning wallets. So one of the things that people keep saying is that, oh, not your keys, not your coins. If you have your Bitcoin on Lightning, then it's not your Bitcoin, of course. That makes sense. But I think the way that money works, there's always going to be some form of trust involved. Especially if you have small transactions, there's always going to be trust involved. I think the way that things are going to work over time is that there are going to be layers built on top of Lightning. Then there's going to be layers built on top of that. Visa is basically a layer on top of a layer on top of a layer on top of a layer.
On
Right?
top
And
of
that's what
shit.
on top of shit, exactly. And that's what people are comparing Bitcoin to. So if you're comparing Bitcoin, the base layer, with final settlement, to Visa, which is not final settlement, and you don't get settlement for like 90 days or something like that, then I don't think you quite understand the point of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
The point of Bitcoin isn't to give you quick transactions, it's to give you final settlement. It can give
Yes.
you final settlement in 10 minutes. And that's the
Yeah.
key here. Also, another important key here is that if you do go with Lightning, you have to give your Bitcoin to a custodian. I get that. But the difference between Lightning and the current financial system is that if your bank collapses in the current financial system, there's going to be contagion and every bank is going to collapse. With Lightning, that's not going to be the case. So let's say you send your Bitcoin to some wallet, that wallet collapses. Let's say you have wallet of Satoshi. They have embezzled user funds. They've done something with it. Now they can't pay you back. Let's say you have Bitcoin on that, and then you also have Bitcoin on Moon. You also have Bitcoin on Strike. Strike has a Lightning wallet, from what I know.
Yeah.
Let's say you also have Bitcoin on another wallet and another wallet. Chances are that if wallet of Satoshi goes down, all of your wallets are not going to go down. The other wallets will still continue to work. If there's some kind of
It's an
fraud,
isolated node, right?
exactly, that's exactly it. That was the exact point. Yeah. So it's
Yes.
an isolated node. It's not impacted by one person's decisions. All your wallets aren't impacted by one person's decision. In the current situation, with when people compare fiat to Bitcoin and they say Bitcoin shouldn't be, it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be layers on top of Bitcoin. The difference is that in the current system, you have one person that can say something and change everything about the entire world. So let's say, for example, you have Jerome Powell. He does one speech, he increases interest rates, and everybody collapses. Everything breaks. The entire financial system falls apart. That's not the case with Bitcoin. Even with a custodian, your Bitcoin is still decentralized. Your Bitcoin is still there. If your custodian is doing the right things, your Bitcoin is still going to be there. So it's not like if your custodian collapses, all Bitcoin wallet providers collapse. It's just that one custodian. It's that one wallet. So it's isolated. I think that's the important thing. We're
Mhm.
always going to have to trust people in the financial system. In the current financial system, there's no choice. There is a choice with Bitcoin. So in Bitcoin, if you do want to pay for coffee with your base layer transaction, of course, but you're going to have to pay the transaction fees for that. It's a choice. You can also go with Lightning. You can pay for your coffee with Lightning. The point here is that you have a choice. With fiat, you don't have a choice. No matter what happens, it's always going to be centralized. Even if you have fiat cash, if you have physical cash, that's still centralized because your central bank can increase the supply of money.
Yeah.
Your government can increase the interest, or your Federal Reserve can increase the interest rate, and that just destroys. It makes it so that everything is connected and everything collapses all at once if something goes wrong.
Yeah, it's a great point to talk about the custodian risk and how you can diversify that, and how there isn't contagion risk necessarily within wallet providers that are custodial in that case. And I think one thing that's interesting to think about as well is, like, for final settlement, the Bitcoin on chain is for final settlement. What can we compare that to? Like, if you think about Bitcoin as like a commodity money, then final settlement would be a commodity money equivalent, which would be settling in probably gold, right? The other thing you could compare it to is Fedwire, which is incredibly slow, incredibly expensive. It fails all the time, and it's settling in fiat money, not commodity money. So you can't even really compare it to that. So again, that's just like totally revolutionary that we have digital commodity money that can be have final settlement, and then everything else can be built on top of that and have trade-offs, which you cannot have. There's trade-offs with all those other things that claim to be better than Bitcoin in some way, or claim to be more in touch with the white paper. The trade-off is centralization. The trade-off is centralization if you increase the speed and all that, right? So something
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
There's
it's pretty incredible just the fact that somebody can send Bitcoin over a QR code over Lightning. Somebody just sent in my favorite number, 8,888 sats from a QR code. That is final settlement. And that says, happy Fat Zap Friday team with a PH for fat. So thank you for that. That's a very generous and nice donation there. The other thing I was going to say with Lightning and with everything right now is, yes, there is a risk, but I don't want to move past the fact that you shouldn't keep a large balance on these, right? And so, kind of my recommendation for anybody out there who is just been buying Bitcoin, sending it to their cold storage, hasn't really dabbled in with Lightning yet. The easiest thing that you can do is just go to aqua.net, I think it is. Download the Aqua wallet. It actually allows for both on-chain and Lightning built into that wallet. The thing that I would say to that, though, is make sure you get something like a wallet of Satoshi or a speed wallet, something that actually gives you a Lightning address. Like we have our, I'll put in the chat right now, but our Lightning address it looks very similar to like an email address, right? Where you can actually just send somebody value using something like an email address there. So ours is Maple Bitcoin at Coinos. You can also use Coinos. The only downside to Aqua Wallet that I've found is that they don't provide you with a Lightning address.
They
So
use
it's
a
great
they
for
use a
swapping on
different
chain to layer 2 and vice versa, but they actually don't give you a Lightning address there. So make sure you're using something like Wallet of Satoshi, Coinos, or Speed Wallet for that Lightning address.
Yeah, so Aqua actually uses a different implementation of Lightning, and they tie into Liquid, which is a
Yes.
side chain of Bitcoin, which is basically a Fediment, which is like I don't know, a dozen or so institutions that end up holding that for you. So not one of them can rug you if you have your Bitcoin on the Liquid network, and they swap Liquid into Lightning for you, and then send that for you if you hold it in Lightning or layer 2 in Aqua. But it does take a little bit more. There's a little bit more fees associated with it compared to other Lightning wallets that are out there.
But it's very simple.
Yeah.
there was another thing that I want to show here.
Oh, sorry,
Based
Jack.
on what we were talking about with no, it's okay. With how much Bitcoin custodians are holding. So from what I know here, the Lightning Network public channels hold about 4,365 Bitcoin. If you look at that as a percentage of total Bitcoin, it's very, very small. So the total percentage is, so the total number of Bitcoin is like 19.8 million. So if you divide this 4,365 by 19, it's a very, very small percentage. I think this is exactly what we're talking about here. You don't want the majority of your wealth on Lightning. You want the majority of it on the base layer and part of it on Lightning so that you can transact with it. But keep in mind, most people will never, ever interact with the base layer of Bitcoin. They're going to interact with people who they trust with Lightning, like with wallets that are developed over time. Let's say, for example, there's probably going to be tons of banks that are offering Lightning in the future, I would assume.
Yes, 100%.
Right? We're going to go through them. So let's say at some point what you're going to see is if you're getting paid by a company, you're not going to get paid. You're going to get paid, let's say, 2,000 Satoshis for a week of work. You're not going to get paid 2,000 Satoshis on the base layer. You're going to get paid 2,000 Satoshis on Lightning, and you're going to directly spend on Lightning. So let's say you go to Walmart. Walmart's going to accept Lightning. So you're going to be able to directly pay with that Bitcoin at Walmart. You get paid a small amount, you put it on Lightning, and you pay for it. You pay for things at Walmart. It's just that easy. You basically never have to go to the base layer if you don't want to. But
Right.
let's say, for example, if you have a really high paying job and you can get to 1 million satoshis after a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks, as soon as you get to 1 million satoshis, you can easily move that over to the base layer. I think that's
Yeah.
the way that things are going to work. That's how things are working today. How many people use physical cash today? Nearly no one.
Exactly. And from you mentioned Walmart there, but I think it's also important to think of like from a small business perspective,
Yeah.
where it basically eliminates the ability for someone to do chargebacks, right? And so
Yeah.
we talk about instant settlement on Lightning. That's a big deal for small businesses because not only can their customers no longer do chargebacks, which has been a huge problem, especially with the online economy now, with people buying and selling things online. There's been a lot of issues with people doing chargebacks where you actually send somebody the product, they do a chargeback, and then you've already sent the product plus you don't get paid for it. That's a massive problem for small businesses. The other part too there is when you go to like a coffee shop or a small local business somewhere, you tap your card and that money comes out of your bank account or gets added to your Visa statement instantaneously. But that money doesn't actually show up to the small business owner's bank account for at least 2 or 3 days. So
Yeah.
with Lightning, not only do they stop the ability to do chargebacks and kind of get screwed out of money, but that money that you just got paid for somebody buying one of your products and services, it's in your wallet instantaneously. You don't have to wait 2 or 3 days anymore. And for small businesses trying to budget and pay employees and pay their input costs, that's a big deal. 2 or 3 days between somebody actually paying at the store and you getting that money in your bank account, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Huge
Totally.
deal.
Oh, we got rid of the bots there. That was quicker than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I
Oh,
handled that. That was through my chat. So I
Nice
started
work.
attacking
that
them
was quick.
back.
Yeah.
I was going to tell everybody to actually, I think that's a good challenge for everybody today, anyways. On YouTube, we're actually streaming on Zap.stream right now. And you could go to, instead of watching on YouTube, you could actually go to a website called sats.gg. It's just sats.gg. You can watch the stream from there and you can actually hook up your Lightning wallet directly to that. You can make any comment you want. It's not filtered or censored by YouTube. You can share links, you can share pictures. It's a much better experience than YouTube over there. So I'd encourage anybody watching on YouTube right now, if you're tired of these bots and stuff happening and getting censored and you can't share links, go try out sats.gg and just see how you like it. You can always go back to YouTube, but most people who go over to zap.stream or sats.gg, they kind of get tired of the centralization and the censorship of YouTube.
Yeah.
So try
All right,
that one out.
Next question.
Yep.
Question
Next
about hoodie.
question. So that one's done. Oh, this one's from Cleaner Machine.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still here or not, but question about the Maple Bitcoin hoodie. Can I scan the code and send payment of 85,000 sats? Absolutely. It's going to the same pot, the same address there as the hoodies are. And by the way, if anybody out there, I think we have 2 hoodies left for the Maple Bitcoin. I was going to bring it down here, but I completely forgot about it to showcase here. But we have 2 of the Maple Bitcoin limited edition navy with our very nice sharp logo on it. We still have 2 left. So if you are wanting to purchase one of those, find a way to get a hold of us or send us an email to maplebitcoinpod@gmail.com and just let us know what your size is and what country you're from, and we'll send over an amount. It works out to be about $100 Canadian, which is about $70 or $75 American for the hoodie and for the shipping.
Yeah, and somebody commented in the last chat that we're overcharging for these hoodies. If you're doing it in a small scale, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
There are people who are charging like $90 for a hat because they're getting a small run made. If you go to a printer, you have to pay for a small number of hoodies.
Yes.
And that cost is spread between all of the hoodies. That's why the cost is a little bit higher. I think that's a justified question to ask, but the way that they approached it was pretty rude.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's totally voluntary, right? Even that QR
Yep.
code besides Forrest's head, like we're not charging people to watch the show. It's something that if you want to support the channel, because we have no plans on getting advertisements and sponsors for the show. We want to be able to retain our voice. So things like the QR code, things like the hoodies, we're going to probably do a couple of those every year, limited runs. And we're probably going to have our own store of merchandise for Maple Bitcoin that you can purchase. And it's just a way to support the channel while getting something in return. And it's all voluntary. We're not forcing you to do anything. If you think it's too much money, then don't buy it. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Easy.
Okay, next comment here. This looks like a big one. In the event of a large-scale catastrophe, such as a global war or solar flare, what is the minimum viable infrastructure required for the Bitcoin network to continue operating or at least survive? That's a really good question.
I mean, technically, one node would be in a Faraday box, and I guess the internet infrastructure would still have to be existing. But even if it was like the internet infrastructure is, you could also kind of think about it as a bunch of nodes as well. So there could be, that infrastructure could be broken in parts, and the Bitcoin network could only be transmitted to certain parts of where the internet was received again. But I mean, maybe satellites would still exist, and satellite internet is accessible to a huge amount of people. Blockstream also has a node on a satellite as well. So it would really depend on what kind of global disruption catastrophe there would be, but total annihilation is what it would cause, basically, or what it would need to be for Bitcoin to not exist at this point because of how decentralized it is.
Yeah, it's just what is it? One node or two? I think it would be two. No, because you have to communicate between the nodes.
Well, no, because it would just need to be one to
with the record.
Yeah,
keep
with
a
the
copy
record.
of it.
That makes
Keep
sense.
a copy of it.
Okay. And then they can just share it with anybody else later on. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be very useful as just one, right? Because I mean, the network gets more and more useful the more nodes there are, the more miners there are, the more people interacting on it. But yeah, you would only need one.
I just screwed up there a little bit. But big shout out. There's been 30 people join the Zap stream since we mentioned that. So what's up, Zap stream? We see you over there.
Nice.
Awesome. There was a question. Somebody said, I just unstarted by accident, but the question was, do you need to be running a node to run a BitX? And the answer to that is no. They're completely different. Same kind of thing. If a guy like me can set up a BitX, then anybody out there can. You basically just hook it up to your Wi-Fi network, and you have to do a few configurations with it. And then you add your Bitcoin address just in case you do actually hit a block. Where does the block subsidy go to? So very simple. You do not need to run a node. They are two different things: the BitX, the home miners, and the running a node.
Yeah. So for solo mining, you would need to run a node, but you can contribute to a pool with your BitX. Is that what you're saying, Jor?
No, you can actually run a solo mine, but hook it up to somebody else's somebody else's node, I believe. Like I'm solo mining here, and it's not connected to my node.
Oh, is that right? Huh. Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
I think, unless I'm doing it wrong. Maybe that's why I haven't won a block yet. No, I'm pretty sure you don't need to be hooked up, but I guess verify, just like everything on the show here, verify everything that we say. Somebody over in the Zap stream asked, can we avoid volunteerism over here?
Yeah, he is monopolizing the chat. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking of banning him as a user.
Maybe just a timeout. What I try to do is a timeout. They usually get pretty mad about it anyway, but I do a timeout, and then it's not about trying to contain someone's speech. It's just about trying to create a favorable chat for people.
Yeah,
it's
getting really annoying at this point.
Yeah,
let other people speak.
Exactly, monopolizing the topic.
This is a really good question, and I actually wanted to kind of introduce this as a topic for today's show. So let's cover this, because I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this first, and then I want to show you a tweet that I saw, something somewhat relating to this today. So the question here is from Stoic Warriors, saying the best Bitcoin storage for maximum safety hodling for 20 years. Oh, the best Bitcoin storage. Sorry, I misread this, but we could still address it anyways. I mean, this is kind of this is what I do every day. I look, my kind of thing within Bitcoin is security and thinking through things. In my opinion, kind of the natural progression for Bitcoiners in terms of security is first step is like on an exchange or holding it in an ETF where you actually don't have any sort of custody of that asset. But I don't think that people should shortcut that. I think that if you're brand new to Bitcoin, it's okay to leave your Bitcoin on an exchange for a little while or buy an ETF and just get the price exposure to Bitcoin. But we'll move past that. So the first stage would be kind of like an AQUA wallet or a Moon wallet or a SPARROW wallet, kind of like a hot wallet or like a software wallet. From there, you move into like a hardware device, which is like a Trezor, a COLDCARD, a Passport, a Jade, something that you actually disconnect that Bitcoin, take it off of the internet essentially, because the first wallets that I mentioned there were hot wallets. So a cold storage would be the next progression there, and then you get into like multi-sig, which adds another layer on top of that, where you need two signatures to move any Bitcoin around. So each one of these is kind of like an added layer of security as you go along there. And then the end point there, for me anyways, the best that I've found is actually going with a multi-sig and encrypting your backups. So instead of leaving like your 12 or 24 words kind of in plain text, you actually encrypt that using something called super backed. So that's something that I do every day pretty much. It's something that I'm very involved in. We actually offer that service from our company that we have. So I'm a little bit biased, but it is the best solution that I've found because you have to consider the fact that it's a huge vulnerability. If you get nothing else from what I just said, it's a huge vulnerability to leave your 12 or 24 words in plain text, whether that's in paper or steel. Because if somebody comes across that, they now have your Bitcoin. There's no security on top of that, right? If you have your cold storage device like a COLDCARD or a Jade, and then you have your 12 words right beside it, you're pretty much making your Jade or COLDCARD obsolete, because if they just have access to those 12 or 24 words, they now have your Bitcoin. Regardless of how good your PIN is on your COLDCARD or your Jade, they now have your Bitcoin because they can just easily type those 12 or 24 words into a wallet and move it with a single sig wallet, and your Bitcoin's gone.
I would say there's one step in between a single sig and a multi sig that I would recommend that also is um, it's a huge step in security that is very simple, which is a passphrase wallet. And if you stored your 12 or 24 words separately than where you store your passphrase, that would be able to keep your Bitcoin safe, because they need both of those things combined to get into your passphrase wallet, which is a separate wallet than the 12 or 24 word wallet. It's almost like a hidden wallet. Very simple security step that you could do beyond a single sig, 12 or 24. That is a massive security upgrade, in my opinion, for the average holder.
That's a great point, Forrest. Thanks for mentioning that. That's kind of what I went through too. Is I actually had a passphrase on a couple wallets, and it is good. You mentioned kind of a hidden wallet or a decoy wallet.
Yeah.
You should be looking into that if you're further along into Bitcoin right now. You should definitely be looking into a passphrase. But the last thing I would say on that is like just take it easy, take it slow. I mentioned like 5 or 6 steps there, including the passphrase. Don't ever try to shortcut things in Bitcoin, because that's how you get burned. So always take things very slow. Make sure you have a good understanding of it, or you have somebody helping you through it. You don't want to take any shortcuts in Bitcoin, because that's usually how you end up losing your Bitcoin. So regardless of whatever step you are, don't try to like jump ahead from like a AQUA wallet to a multi-sig. Bitcoin takes time. There are no shortcuts in Bitcoin.
I
Yeah.
think it's important to know that there's always trade-offs, right? If you do something and it's really complicated, you make it more likely that your family is not going to be able to find your Bitcoin. So figure out
Correct.
the right trade-offs and go based on what you think makes sense for you. I would say if you have a limited understanding of how computers work on that before you try to do anything too complicated.
The other thing here too is all three of us, we all do Bitcoin one-on-one coaching. You can book a session with any one of us or anyone else that you find that you
Yeah.
like in this space. That is really worth the money, just because you don't know what you don't know. You could do endless hours of research in this, but if you're not getting fed the right information, you could miss out on some key points. And we
Yep.
all have a lot of experience between the three of us. So that's one thing I would just say. There's another comment here I just wanted to quickly address, guys. Somebody asked about audio only. We do post this on Spotify and all the audio podcast platforms like Apple and everything. So just search Maple Bitcoin. You'll find it on there. I do that now for all of the shows are on there now, except the live streams, but the individual episodes are all on there.
Just to follow up on that, Forrest, I would say I just actually added the show notes here. So now you can find in the show notes, you can find the links to book with Rajat, Jor, and Forrest if you are. And kind of the analogy that I like using there is like when you first learn to drive, nobody just hands you the keys and says, hit the highway. Right? You either go through a couple months of like driving with somebody beside you or like a driving instructor. And that's kind of what we do here with these one-on-one sessions. We're kind of like the driver instructor there. So you're in the wheel, but we're just kind of there with the brake and making sure that you're not missing anything. That's kind of how I see it there. So now if you're interested in that, you can look in our show notes. And speaking of show notes, we'll get a couple shills in at the end here. We now have a Bitcoin Well account for Maple Bitcoin. So I just put the link there, and I'll actually we'll do a little Bitcoin giveaway here. Somebody asked for it in the chat there. So I'll bring up my screen here. We'll do a couple free spins maybe for the chat here. You deserve it after having to listen to volunteerism for 2 hours straight in the chat. So here you go. The first person to scan this QR code here is going to win some free sats today. So get your Lightning wallets out. I'll give you about 3 seconds here.
Ready.
And you're ready, Forrest?
I'm ready.
Okay. So here you go. Here's the first one. And these sats are courtesy of the Bitcoin Well. They do not pay me. They do not pay Maple Bitcoin. It's just a really good way to give something back to the people who are showing up here for the shows. So somebody just got 210 sats, the first person to scan that. And we'll do one more here. And if you're in Canada or in the US, I highly recommend Bitcoin Well as it's the exchange or the platform that I use. They got the lowest fees that I've found. And they got a lot of cool things on there. You can buy, you can sell, you can do a recurring buy, you can pay bills, you can swap on-chain to Lightning for free.
Yeah.
And just a very interactive website there. So make sure that you're just give Bitcoin Well a shot. Take a couple $100, you get some free tosses into the well. And once again, you can use that bitcoinwell.com/Maple Bitcoin, something like that. It's in the chat there.
Sweet.
So there you go.
Are we planning to wrap here soon, guys?
Yeah, I gotta cut it off soon.
Yeah, we gotta cut it off. So I think we've probably gotten to most of the questions, maybe not all of them, but yeah.
We got the Masters to watch here.
All right, I think we'll stop it there then.
Yeah. You want to? Okay, I was gonna do one more here.
All right, sounds good.
Is this Andy? After a block is found, how much time do they have to pick the transactions to put into a block? Does the software choose the highest fees instantly? Is there a new block chasing their heels? I actually don't know that. I've never come across an instance where I have to do that on my own. I know there is software that you can use to generate block templates based on highest fees. You can screen like ruins and ordinals and stuff like that out. I don't know enough about it to really comment on that. Do you guys?
There's a slight advantage to the person that mines the block and has the longest chain because it takes a while for the nodes to update when a new block has come in. So if the miner's been chosen, they're going to have a slight advantage to start guessing at the next or start trying to solve for the next block. But the block templates are basically you set up a block template as what you want to create, whether that's all transactions or whether you have some sort of filters on it. And that starts getting built as the transactions come in and before the block is actually solved. And then it's created upon solving. So they don't have time between having solved it and picking transactions. It all happens beforehand.
It's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe start wrapping things up here, boys.
Yeah.
I would say just a couple thank yous here. We got another zap. Happy Friday, Maple Bitcoin. Great content from Live Free Mike, 888 sats. We got a fat zap here of 85,000, but that is for the hoodie, but it's still on there nonetheless. And then we got a 2,500 sat zap from somebody anonymously. So thank you everybody for those. Thanks for being here once again. Do you guys have any closing thoughts for today?
Yeah, just leave a thumbs up if you can. I feel like they really help with sharing the content with more people. If more
Oh
people
yeah.
see this, it
Yeah.
helps.
That's what I was going to say there, Rajat, because between the three of us, we probably have at least 35,000 unique subscribers on our channel. And I'm thinking most people watching here aren't subscribed to Maple Bitcoin. So I'll throw the link to Maple Bitcoin in the chat. You don't have to, obviously. We're not going to tell you to do it. But if you've been enjoying our stuff and you don't want to miss any of our clips and stuff like that, there's the link to Maple Bitcoin there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we go live every week at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays, just like today. And yeah, just go check out all of our own individual channels. There are a few questions we missed. Jor and I both do live streams. I got one coming up on Sunday. Jor does them quite often. So if there's some questions that we didn't answer here, you can ask us individually, or you can wait till next week, or you can get in the comment section on one of Rajat's videos and ask away as well for anything that we've missed. But appreciate everybody for tuning in and watching.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thanks, fellas. It was lots of great topics today. I want to do more of these. I think we should be talking about topics like this versus like the current stuff. I feel like there's enough people talking about the current news and stuff like that. So we'll do our best to manage some of these thought experience and topics or whatever we got going on. But thanks everybody once again for all the love in the chat. Thank you for everybody for the zaps, that QR code, just in case you're feeling generous on a Friday afternoon, you want to support the Lambo Fund. Thanks, Forrest. Thanks, Rajat. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you this time next week.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.